decreased performance. The number of lapses and the average reaction times are getting worse over time. They're accumulating rapidly at 4-hour time in bed and 6 hours, even at 8-hour time in bed. This is quite surprising, but just limiting individuals over the course of 14 days to 8 hours of time in bed. There are going to be individual differences, by the way. So you can always say, well, that wouldn't happen to me. I need 4 or 5 hours of sleep, let's say. So there definitely are real individual differences. There's individual differences in how people perform on a day-to-day basis on a given amount of sleep. There's individual differences in how they respond to a restriction in that amount of sleep. So you get increased variability with time across these kinds of experiments. But that is quite a striking result, that you would actually get a gradual impairment or a reduction or an increase in the number of lapses, attention lapses, as a consequence of being restricted to what would seem to be the normal amount of time in bed.
3 hours.
So these two studies, and here's with 9 hours of time in bed, and you don't see that effect at all. So there's no accumulation of one objective measure of fatigue as a consequence of being restricted to 9 hours in bed. So there's a difference between 8 hours and 9 hours. So important thing to emphasize then is that a couple of things. You get progressive impairment over time. There's no evidence for adaptation in the sense that being restricted to 6 hours a night, at least over 14 days, it's continuing to decline. It's not starting to come down again, so there's no evidence for adaptation. And there are large individual differences which are not illustrated here. But that is something that's very important to appreciate, is that individuals differ greatly, not only in the amount of sleep that they need on a daily basis, but how they respond to a reduction of that. So there was a hint in that last slide that the amount of time you spend in bed, above and beyond what would seem to be a normal amount of time in bed, can actually be beneficial. And in the entire annals of sleep research, there's very few sleep extension studies, very few. This is the only one I can find on sleep extension in athletes. This was a study that was published with William Dement, who's like the father of sleep medicine. He was the person that discovered rapid eye movement sleep in the 1950s and opened the first sleep disorders clinic at Stanford, and that's still one of the biggest sleep disorder centers in the world. So this has a lot of credibility, this study. And they looked at Stanford varsity basketball players, and they enlisted a group. I'm sorry, the numbers are all really small, but they're looking at ends of about 11 and 15, 11 subjects that were on sleep extension. That meant that they had to stay in bed for 10 hours every night. And they did this for 5 to 7 weeks. They actually have measures here, not polysomnographic measures, but they have actigraphy measures and also sleep log measures of how much extra sleep they were getting. It looks about 25% more. They certainly were spending that extra time in bed, and it looks like they were getting more sleep as well. And then they did a whole bunch of different measures, and then the bottom line is at the end, they're measuring here things like sprint speed, free throws out of 10, three-point field goals out of 15, self-rating at practice, self-rating at games, and all of these were significantly enhanced by the sleep extension protocol. So they were getting about 9 hours of sleep. They had a 10-hour sleep opportunity, but the numbers indicate it looks like they were getting about 9 hours of sleep during that time. And psychologically as well, these are vigor, fatigue, tension, depression, anger, confusion. They're all positive. They're all significantly enhanced. So anything that you can do to improve the sleep of individuals can have an impact both in how they feel and in really objective measures like how many free throws they hit in a number of sessions. And these aren't just single sessions, but these are averages of large numbers of sessions. So these are reproducible effects, and it's that 1 or 2 extra free throws that you get in a game that can make a difference. So even where effect sizes seem small, they're clinically significant, is the way to put it. All right, so all of the sleep research indicates that what sleep loss impacts primarily are psychological variables: motivation and emotion, cognitive processing, reaction times, executive decision making. And it underscores something that I would be saying for my students, which is that sleep really is of the brain and for the brain. Does the body really need to sleep? Probably not so much. What the body needs is it needs the rest of the brain. It's the brain that controls autonomic functions, and that's what determines whether the body's going to be healthy or not. And more sleep is better, as far as we can tell from the data that's available. It actually can make a difference to enhance sleep. So given those data, the kinds of recommended actions that seem logical to pursue would be to do sleep assessments on all players. And in particular, you're looking for sleep disorders that may be undiagnosed. I personally think that I have a sleep disorder. And I'm getting to the point where I think I do need to go to a clinic. Either that, or at the very least, I think I need to tape myself at night. And so what would be the symptoms of that? The symptoms of that would be where I get up in the morning, have a cup of tea, walk the dog, then I have a cup of coffee, and then I will often take a nap. Now, how do you do that? I shouldn't be able to take a nap in the morning after caffeine. 20 or 30-minute nap, and then I'm finally alert. So what I think I must have is I probably have some kind of a sleep apnea. There's a non-restorative aspect to my sleep. I'm in bed for 8 hours. So that would be an example where I don't feel that I can do quality creative work on my workstation on many days unless I take a nap in the middle of the morning. And the same kinds of things, can happen certainly to players. And it can affect not just your creative abilities or your physical performance, but it's potentially going to affect how you interact with people, your emotional state, your ability to work well with others, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Is there a solution to curing
sleep
that?
apnea?
Yeah.
Well, the first solution would be to get diagnosed, see if that's the issue, and then there are treatments for sleep apnea.
Okay.
I wouldn't be a candidate for a surgical treatment because obviously, I wouldn't have obstructive sleep apnea. I could have essential sleep apnea where I'm actually not breathing. When you stop breathing in certain states, it's probably not the case, but I have a suspicion that there's something going on. And if I wear actigraphy and if I put an audio tape myself, and I might actually hear some sounds that would indicate that there's some issues around breathing. And while we don't have great solutions, oddly, we have some that work, so the surgical approach can work for some people. But positive airway pressure, CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure, you put this mask on, and it forces air. And that can work for people. And I suspect that I would be a good candidate for that sort of thing if that was the issue, because I don't have a problem having a pillow over my head or putting eye patches on, that sort of thing, which can bother some people. So sleep disorders, undetected sleep disorders, would be something I think that would be important to screen all players for. If the kinds of assessments that you can use to detect such a disorder, if there was an indication of a disorder, then you would want to do a referral to an actual sleep clinic. So then they do an overnight and polygraphic assessment, etc. The more likely issues around that you might find with sleep assessments are poor sleep hygiene. So this is where people just really don't have good practices around sleep. And poor sleep hygiene can be manifested in so many different ways. Just the conditions under which you set up your bedroom, the kinds of activities you